When Abram and Lot agreed to go their separate ways because of their great wealth, we see the generosity of Abram. We hear from Genesis 13, 1 through 12. So Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negeb. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold, and he journeyed on from the Negeb as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord, and Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right, and if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, in the direction of Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. This is the word of the Lord. Please stand for the reading of the gospel. When a woman honored Jesus by washing his feet with expensive perfume, some were shocked. Yet Jesus commended her for her generosity toward him. We hear from Matthew 26, 1 through 16. When Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." Now when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated.
So a number of years ago, I was living in Utah, and I was running at the time, so pasta and pasta dishes became a kind of a staple in my household. And so one day, there was a store, the local grocery store that we would go to. They were having a sale on one particular kind of pasta, and my wife, being the frugal person that she is, found a coupon for it. And so she gave me the coupon. I went to the store, and I got the pasta on the sale price, checked out, and gave them the coupon. So I paid, $1 or something like that for the box of pasta. And then as it was printing out the receipt, this particular store would also print out like additional coupons and things depending on what you were buying. So it printed off a coupon for that same brand of pasta. If you buy one, you get $1 off. This seemed like a really great thing. So I got home, said, "Hey, look what it printed off for me." She said, "Well, while you're driving in tomorrow, why don't you stop and get another box of pasta? Because now with this $1 off coupon, it was going to cost just a few cents." Stop in there the next morning, pick up that box of pasta, go and check it out, use the coupon that was printed the night before. It prints out another coupon for me. Buy 2, get $2 off. So I get in and I say, hey, guess what? It printed off a new coupon for me. She's like, well, while you're coming home, why don't you stop and get a couple more boxes? Because, again, we would eat quite a bit of pasta at that time. So as I'm going home, I stop, I get 2 boxes of pasta, go and check out, use the coupon that takes the $2 off. It prints another coupon. Buy 3, get $3 off. I go out to the parking lot and say, you know what? What do you think? Should I go in and get some more? She's like, pasta doesn't really expire. It doesn't really go bad. We're in Utah where it's not going to, it's not going to get all crumbly like in more humid places. So I went in, buy 3 more boxes. Guess what? Another coupon prints out. It's still the buy 3, get 3 off. I'm like, I think I'm on to something here. I don't remember how many times we did this before finally she said to me, I think you've got enough. You need to stop now. I don't remember what the final number was, but I think there was a pretty full shelf of pasta in our pantry for a little while. Yes, I used them all, but I also realized it took someone else than myself saying, you know what, I think you've got more than enough here. You could maybe say that there was a little bit of greed going on there. Some might call it a good deal, but in some respects, we can also see where the way we might look at greed can describe a situation like this. Because at its heart, greed is a reluctance to trust in God to provide what we need. Let me say that again. Greed is a reluctance to trust in God to provide what we need. Now, as we hear the word greed, the most likely thing that jumps to mind is our money. We think of things like Uncle Scrooge sitting there counting his gold coins and thinking that he doesn't have enough. And we start to think about that and realize, yeah, there's that greed. We want to have a larger income. We want to have more. How much is enough? Well, maybe just a little bit more than what I have right now. We have this tendency to have this greed in our lives. But it also spills over into other places besides just our finances. Can you be greedy with your time? I think of an occasion every once in a while where I'll be asked by one of my kids, can you come and do something with me? Well, I'd rather do something else. Why is that? Because I want to be greedy with my time. I want to spend my time on things that I want and less on what others might want. Or maybe even more on what I want and less on what God might want. Or can we be greedy with influence? I want my opinion to count more than others. Thinking that, you know what, it may not matter that there are other people that think something else. Shouldn't mine be the one that counts? Even if I'm the one that's in the minority, shouldn't my opinion somehow count more than others? And you can probably think of other places in life where greed might spill over. The reality for us is that greed has been around for a very, very long time. In fact, we heard it in the story that Tom was reading for us a few moments ago, all the way back in Genesis. You've got Abram, who's been called by God to leave his family and go to another country. His nephew Lot comes along with him. They are rich people. They have lots of herds, lots of flocks. And as they are moving through the countryside, they realize, you know what? We've got so much. Our shepherds are fighting with each other. This isn't how it should be. We should actually kind of make a little bit of a separation so we're not causing all these problems. And so we get Abram coming up to Lot and saying, okay, here's the land that lays before us. Why don't you pick the land that you want to? And so if you go this way, I'll go that way. They agree that this is going to be how it will work. And Abram gives Lot the first choice. And then as we heard Tom read it, Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. In other words, Lot looked at the whole land, said, look, we've got these mountainsides with all of these scraggly bushes, and then we've got the Jordan Valley. There's a river running here. It's where the land is fertile. I think I'll take the fertile land. Lot sees the best of the land and chooses it. And in some ways we can say there might have been a little bit of greediness there. And we might look at it and say we can hardly fault him. After all, it's a good-looking place, and if that was the choice given to us, who wouldn't choose that? But we can also see where Lot maybe was thinking of choosing for his own good. And as we think about greed, it puts a little bit of a dilemma in front of us. Where do we find ourselves straddling the line that would mark greediness? We want what is best for ourselves. We want what is good for our families. But at what point have we started to cross the line over into greediness? The truth be told, we're probably likely finding ourselves on that line a whole lot more than what we might think. And that's a problem for us. It's a problem because greed and God do not go together. In fact, we are frequently reminded that God is not a God of greediness, but rather a God of generosity. James 1 puts it in a really good way when he writes, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights. It's not just the good things that happened in your life. It is those things that are like, wow, look at what God is doing. We see that God is a God of generosity. He wants to provide. And He will provide. In fact, we see this in the life of one of the more well-known characters in the Old Testament, David. When David went in a few directions that he shouldn't have, and God spoke to him to remind him of what he had done wrong, God actually spoke a word of generosity to him. In 2 Samuel 12:8, it says, I would add to you as much more. In other words, God was looking and saying, David, you took one little thing away from another person. I could have given you so much more, and you chose to be greedy with something even small. And then there is, of course, where we see the generosity of our God in that well-known verse from Ephesians 2. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God. Generosity is part of the character of God. God wants to give. He wants to give abundantly. And yet what you and I find ourselves doing is we grasp onto smaller amounts than what He really wants to give to us. And we want to hold on to it and hold it so tightly because we're afraid that we won't have enough if we let go of it. We see this when God led the people of Israel out of Egypt. He took them out, and as they're wandering in the wilderness, one of the things that God told them is, I'm going to take care of you every day. Every morning there will be dew on the ground, and when that dew dries up, you're going to find a little wafer-like thing out there on the ground. You're to collect that and provide enough for yourself for that day. And it'll happen tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. On the seventh day, you need to collect, or the sixth day, you need to collect enough for the seventh day. But other than that, don't collect extra. It will be there tomorrow. And even though God had told Moses to go and tell the people, guess what? There were those who said, there's no guarantee this will be there tomorrow. And they collected extra. And it tells us that it was moldy and maggoty and spoiled. That was the price of their greediness. The thing is, we might think that God's going to do the same thing to us. maybe he won't give us enough. And so we demonstrate greed and a reluctance to rely on him. And yet, God designed us for generosity because that is a characteristic of his. When he created the first man, rather than just saying, hey, you got the whole earth, you can go and find a place to fit in there, tells us that he actually made a garden for the man. And he took the man and he placed him in the garden. And sure, there were some responsibilities there for the man to uphold, but he gave the man a place to provide for him. To the Israelites, he gave what was needed while they were out there in the wilderness. To Abram, he made the promise, I am going to give this land to your descendants. He assures his people throughout the Old Testament, you don't need to worry. I am going to take care of you. My mercy and my care and my steadfast love for you is forever. It is long lasting. My anger might go to the second or third generation or the third or fourth generation, but my love, my steadfast love endures forever. And then God is generous with his people when it comes to forgiveness. There's nothing that is larger than what he can forgive because he is generous. And he wants to give the fruits of his son's cross. In fact, think of it this way. Who here has heard of the tithe before? Some of you are saying, yeah, you've heard the word tithe before. It's probably been something that you've heard at some point, perhaps in some kind of a campaign. We would look at that and say, that's kind of the mark of a generous person, right? A tenth of things. When it came to your redemption, God didn't stop at a tithe. In fact, we have Paul writing this of Jesus in 2 Corinthians 8. Consider him who was rich, yet for your sake became poor, that by his poverty we might become rich. Jesus is generous in giving up everything for you. And that includes his very own life. As he says it in John chapter 10, no one takes it from me. I lay it down of my own accord, and I have the authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. The Father is generous. The Son is generous. The heart of God knows no end of generosity. It's not about a percentage. It is about a characteristic of a life that reflects the God who made it and who redeemed it. And so as God's forgiven people upon whom God's Spirit has been given, God now works to shape generous hearts in us. And one part of what happens is that when we reflect on his word, we start to see how God's Spirit works to shape us into his original design. But that shaping sometimes means that there are certain things required of us as part of that. So God doesn't oftentimes suddenly just put his Spirit on you and suddenly there's a huge change. Think about Zacchaeus. Everyone remembers who Zacchaeus was, right? The wee little man who had to climb up in the sycamore tree. And Jesus walks by, says, Zacchaeus, come down. I'm coming over to your house. He comes over. He tells Zacchaeus that God's salvation has visited this house that day. And Zacchaeus says, you know what? I've cheated people, but I'm going to give back 4 times what I owe them. And I'm going to give half of everything else to the poor. That is a wonderful response. 3 weeks later, do you think Zacchaeus might still have been struggling with greed in his life? You see, it's not just a one-time thing where God's Spirit suddenly snaps his fingers and boom, you're a generous person. In fact, what we find is that God tells us that we oftentimes learn these things by actually doing them. We respond to his Spirit's prompting, and that is where we learn these characteristics. You practice generosity in order to see how God designed you to be generous. So as we venture through Lent, Maybe this can be one of those areas like we talked about last week where we add on something rather than simply giving up something. Maybe we can think about how we add on the habit of generosity in our life. What could that look like? Well, maybe it's somewhere where you find one small area where you say, you know what, I'm just going to trust God to take care of this. I'm going to be generous with this. If it's your time, you say, okay, I'm going to give a little bit of time toward this thing, and I'm going to let God show me what it means to be generous here. Start small. See what you can manage. Maybe it's also, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's more like a volunteer opportunity. Newsflash, we're going to be finding volunteer opportunities around here. So if you want to try this out, we will find some ways to do this. Maybe it's in support of God's work in your life, or the time that you give to others to build them up. But regardless of what it is, God encourages us as His people. Be generous. And as you practice generosity, you will see God's Spirit working generosity within you. That's because the battle for your soul is real. So as God gives us opportunity, may we be led by His soul to practice generosity. In the name of Jesus, amen. Now may the peace of God guard your hearts and souls and keep you in true faith to life everlasting. John Scott, I think I skipped over the song earlier. You want to do it now? Okay, we'll do our prayers, and then we'll have a couple of songs there. All right, let's stand up for prayer.